adventure, sports, outdoors. With host Harry Canterbury.
There I was, back in the wild again, and I felt right at home where I belong. I had that feeling coming over me again, just like it happened so many times before. Yeah.
Hi, Harry Canterbury with another edition of Adventure Sports Outdoors. Join us today at the Jake Wolf Fish Hatchery near Manito, Illinois, and we're going to spend some time with Wayne Herndon, who spent 45 years with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources as a district fishery biologist. So come on inside and take a look.
Adventure Sports Outdoors, brought to you in part by Corsaw Lumber, manufacturers of quality hardwood products, buyers of standing timber in Smithfield, Central Pool Supply, everything from pools to pool tables and much more in Peoria on West Pioneer Parkway. Mike O'Brien, Remax Commercial, Traders Unlimited Commercial. Kelleher's Irish Pub and Eatery, located on Peoria's riverfront, open 11 a.m. daily. Our thanks to all of these sponsors.
Hi, Harry Canterbury with another edition of Adventure Sports Outdoors. We're in Manito, Illinois at the Jake Wolf Fish Hatchery with a dear friend of mine and a great guy. He is a fish biologist and will be for the rest of his life, but he's retired now from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Wayne Herndon. And we had Wayne on our program last month. He is a Vietnam veteran, but he's also a very well, how can I say this? He was well respected in the fishing industry and also as a fish biologist, a district fisheries biologist. So this was built in '83, and what type of fish do they raise here?
We raise a lot of different fish here. It's a very interesting facility because it's one of the only ones in the world that produce cool water, warm water, and cold water fish species.
Really?
And they have very different needs as far as their life histories. And so in order to get them all into one building at one site, that was
quite an undertaking.
achievement. Yeah.
So what you're saying, so if they're going to raise fish like trout, they have to be at a certain temperature, and then bluegill. Well, tell me the species that they raise here. That would be interesting.
With the trouts, coho, chinook, we have lake trout, brown trout. Those are the basic cool water or cold water fishes that we raise. Then the cool water would be northern pike and muskie and walleye. And then the warm water fish would be the rest.
The bluegills,
The bluegill,
crappies,
bass, catfish as well.
So
right.
they do raise catfish here too?
Well, most of the catfish production in Illinois are raised in southern Illinois at Little Grassy Hatchery because their facility is better
to accommodate that species.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's it's like a choreography going on here when we have all these different species spawning at different times and at different sizes as the year goes by. And the fish hatchery manager just has a tremendous job.
He's got his hands full.
That's right, because all the cold water fish, their eggs come in October and November. The warm water fish all are producing in May and June, and the cold water fish are usually in February, March, and April. So that's a real job.
Particularly you, would go to Spring Lake, which is kind of the brood ground for the muskies, and you would milk the muskies, catch them out there in nets, and milk those fish specifically for this hatchery.
Right. We'd bring the fish in here
Oh, you bring
actually
the fish in
to work
containers,
them.
okay.
And by doing that, we got a lot of information on muskie that probably no other agency in the world has been able to get.
Right.
And that would involve growth rates. We had each fish marked, so we know would know it. This is Fred that we stocked in 2005, and Fred weighs 20 pounds. And on the females, we also kept track of the amount of eggs that each fish would
Well,
produce.
that's interesting. How many eggs will one fish produce a year?
Well, we were fortunate if we got a quart of eggs out of an individual fish when we'd go to spawn
And
them.
how many would be in that?
Well, it depends. Eggs are of different sizes, but usually we'd get maybe 25, 30,000 eggs out
What's
of a
the
quart.
survival rate on that?
We were aiming for a fairly low number, and in the wild, those fish would be lucky to get 1% survival.
Really?
But we oftentimes could get 70, 75, 80%.
That's quite remarkable. It
Yeah.
really is. It
Yeah.
really is. A lot of the guys up in Lake Michigan, of course, Illinois, over the years used to stock literally millions of salmon in Lake Michigan. The alewives, which is a bait fish, and the smelt, which I used to go up there and get them by the truckloads, they're not as plentiful as they used to be. So the state feels that they don't really want to stock a lot of these nice fish in there because there's really not a lot for them to eat. So, and then the budget of the state has been cut so dramatically, and we all are aware of the drastic cuts in state government. What's your opinion on that, of why is that correct in saying what I just did?
Yeah, the purpose of a hatchery is to produce fish as needed for a particular species or for a set of species in order to make up for the fish's natural ability to reproduce. And with the case of the salmon and the lake trout and the brown trout, it hasn't been really that important to the biology of those lakes to stock fish in the face of not having any forage in order
So the
to feed them.
lack of feed is one of the biggest reasons.
That's right, and we don't do anything on Lake Michigan that's not coordinated with all the Midwestern states and provinces.
We have Michigan, you have Indiana.
We have
Wisconsin.
an agency, the Great Lakes Commission, and that commission assigns a number of fish for each individual state bordering the lake in order to come up with the necessary fish stocks to maintain the population.
Another question, and I know you're very aware of it, the invasive Asian carp. We know what problem they are. I know a guy that makes a very good living catching those by the hundreds of thousands of pounds per year, and you know him too, Mr. Briney. What threat is that right now to the Great Lakes, and what would it do to the Great Lakes if that fish got in?
Right.
I hear it's already there.
Well, the fish is within striking range of being there. There are biological necessities, that kind of describe a fish's life. Most of the Asian carp, luckily, need flowing water in order to reproduce and do well. But we certainly don't want to run the risk of having them introduced into the lakes and, become a different kind of fish, because fish can adapt to their environment that they're in. In its native ground in South China, they need current in order to reproduce. Then not so much reproduction going on in quiet water. So we do have that going for us, and we are monitoring the population to such an extent that we see minor changes in that population due to sampling efforts that have been undergoing.
Hi, I'm Dave Barth with your Sportsman's Tip of the Week. With ammo prices getting higher and higher almost on a daily basis, you might want to consider reloading, especially rifle and pistol shells. It doesn't take that much of an investment and that much equipment to get started. You need a reloading press, you need a powder scale, a powder measure, and dies. A nice accessory to have is a case tumbler. Of course, you need media for the tumbler. It's not a necessity that you have to have something like this, but it just cleans your brass and you get a good looking cartridge when you're done. Now, if you want to save some money, you can buy all of this equipment in a kit, and it's everything you need to start reloading except a set of dies. Once you have your basic equipment, you can change calibers for between $30 and $40 by buying a set of dies for each particular caliber. Once you have your equipment, you need your components. Primers you can buy by the thousand. Powder comes in single pound lots or in kegs. You need bullets of some type. Lead bullets like this are a real cost savings. When you shoot lead, like out of a 45 long Colt, for example, factory ammunition is $30 to $40. You can load a box of shells for $10. If you want to load rifle ammunition, you can buy bullets by the hundred, and you'll load for about half of what they sell for new. And of course, you need brass. I'm Dave Barth with your Sportsman's Tip of the Week.
Andy Boog is here with Adventure Sports Outdoors. I'm here with my daughter Ella and Wayne Herndon, and we're just kind of trying to figure out what this is going on back here. Wayne, what we got going on back here?
Well, we're in a section of the fish hatchery here that has a little museum that's associated with man's use of the Illinois River. And one of the uses used to be there was a market for shells. And this shows how fishermen used to catch these wild animals on the bottom of the river in order to make buttons. This was in the age before plastics, and now all buttons are made out of plastic. I've got plastic buttons on, but I don't have shell buttons. And this is how they used to make shell buttons before age of plastic. This is called a crowfoot bar, and it looks like a crow's foot, each individual hook on here. And they used to hook this up to a boat and pull it in the current so that it would ride on the bottom, and the shells are laying on the bottom with the siphon open like this, and these hooks would come along, get in that siphon, and the shell would close, and then they'd lift it every so many feet. And they'd get a good variety. There's maybe, I'd say, 6 or 7 different kinds of shells on here. Some of them were very valuable to make buttons out of. Here's a valuable shell. It's called a 3-ridge, and that's one of the common shells that we had that the fishermen caught. And they used to do this in the 1800s before outboard motors. And how would you pull a crowfoot bar that would hang up on roots and everything in that kind of situation? But they used to make a sail out of a tarp, an old tarp, and put it down so that it would be underwater, and the current would pull this crowfoot bar on the bottom, and the shells would hook on as they were passed by the crowfoot bar. Unbelievable power of that underwater sail. They could pull the bow right out of a boat, so they had to be careful doing it. But this happened back in the, say, 1880s on through the 1920s, 1930s, before the shells pretty much left due to pollution in the river.
That's very interesting. You don't have any buttons on here that are made out of shells, do you?
Nope.
No, don't have none of those.
Look, Dad, look at these shells.
Wow, isn't that neat? You know what each one of those holes become? One of those buttons we were just looking at over there that Wayne was telling us about. This is the shells that they used to create the buttons.
That's unique.
The days before plastic, yeah. It was an important part of the economy.
Yeah. So,
and it dealt with the river.
Yeah, so when you didn't have plastic, they had to make everything out of these shells. And think about the amount of labor that it took. You can see this guy sitting here working. Each one of those buttons, he had to drill those out, each one. And then they had to make a button out of it. So when plastic came along, obviously that changed the way things were done.
This is an interesting fact. That girl that's in the picture sitting on the mound of shells, when she was 95 years old, she came in and saw that picture when this entire museum display was on a riverboat. Oh, yeah. The department had a historic presentation, and anybody could walk on the riverboat and take a look, and we have the lays and everything, but she came in and she said, "That's me."
No kidding.
Yeah.
Isn't that great? So she
Yeah.
remembered that, and she got to see herself back when she was really young. That's a good story.
This is one of the devices used to catch fish, commercial fishermen used. And this is called a trammel net, and it's got 2 different sizes of mesh. The fish would be swimming through the water, stick his head into the mesh and through the other mesh, and it would form a pocket. And the fish was then trapped, and that's how they caught a lot of the fish.
And this is another fish net, right? They were coming here and they couldn't get out.
Right. This is a hoop net, and that's exactly how it worked, mostly for things like catfish and buffalo and fine fish like maybe bluegill and crappie. And they liked to be in those nets because it was dark and shaded, and it was just like them being in a brush pile. So it was real effective at catching fish. Let's look at these. These are basket traps, and they're made out of, what do you think?
Wood.
Wood, right. And they usually had bait in them. The only problem was being made out of wood, they'd always want to float. So in order to set those, they'd soak the whole trap in water for like a month, and then bait it and take it out, and it would sink to the bottom. They'd tie them up. And that was a real good way of catching channel catfish, which is one of the most desired fish. That's a throat of the trap, and it's like a funnel. The fish would swim down that funnel and then go into 2 different chambers back here, and they'd eventually end up where the bait is, back in this end. But it was really efficient, and this was patterned after what the Indians used in order to catch channel catfish in the Mississippi and the Illinois River. The other method of catching fish commercially was called trot lining, and it was real good at catching big catfish and other game fish. And what they do is they would take hooks and they would bait them with a worm or whatever, a grasshopper, and then the hooks actually would set themselves, they'd jump right out of the box as the boat was moving and be weighted to the bottom. That's why they're called jump boxes. This is a good shot of a kind of an area along the Illinois River, and it shows the topography a little bit, the kinds of trees that we have along the river's edge, and the shallow banks. And I've spent 45 years working on areas like this, especially the Illinois River. And it's been very entertaining to me and very informative, and I have a lot better appreciation of our world.
We as outdoorsmen and sportsmen really appreciate all the efforts that you guys have put in here to make sure that we have fish in our waterways, and that, you know, the hunting is at its peak, and everything that you guys do here at the state in order to provide us with opportunities to fish and hunt. So we really do appreciate it. I really appreciate you showing me and Ella around today. She got to experience some things she's never got to experience before, so it's very much appreciated, sir, and appreciate you for your service.
Thank you, and thank you for coming, Ella.
Thank you.
Wayne's like me, was raised on the Illinois River. In fact, the name Herndon, you are some relation to Lincoln's law partner down the road, huh? Billy Herndon.
Might be.
Or, it sounds like. I mean, that's a name that I don't hear too often about. We're standing in front of a wooden boat. We had 4 of these at the Red Nose Gun Club down at Duck Island. These are handmade boats, made many years ago, and they're partly cypress, if not all cypress. Tell us about this particular boat and who made it.
This boat was one of many that was made by a fellow in Liverpool, Illinois, which is a little community along the Illinois River. And his name was George Warren, and he had a boat works there where he provided these duck boats for people that wanted to go up to Clear Lake and hunt. And also he'd sell them, he'd build them and sell them. And it's one of none that I'm aware of that's still left.
I had one, but it fell apart.
Yeah, that they were so nice because they rode like a swan on the water, and They were very, very maneuverable. You could set decoys out of them. You could shoot out of them. You could wedge willows in on the side.
That's how we made blinds.
All right,
Yeah.
and it would be very sturdy and reliable, and you could just stand up and shoot away.
Yeah, aluminum boat, you know, if you get up, and there's always give on those aluminum boats, especially if you got a number of people in there, and when you pull that shotgun up and you're following that duck and you pull the trigger, and that boat rocks an inch, you're off a foot on that duck. And I know a lot of guys that hunt out aluminum boats, and that's a common problem. But these boats here were like shooting on the ground. Of course, your passion was a lot like mine, was duck hunting, and we saw. You're a little older than me. You're about 8 or 9 years older than me. I was born in '53. Born in '44.
45.
45. Well, about 8 years older. But you saw, and I did too. You saw more of it than I did. But when ducks used to work the cornfields near Manito, they'd work them all the way to Bloomington. They'd go out to Astoria. They went everywhere up and down the river, 20 miles either way, you could find ducks working cornfields. I haven't seen a duck work a cornfield in 30 years. And maybe I wasn't there when they were, but they were there all the time. And we don't see the big migration come through anymore. And you mentioned to me earlier that it was a ritual. Duck hunting is more of a ritual than it is something of substance. You go out and hunt, and if you kill a mallard or two or a couple of wood ducks, you're satisfied. When we were young, and we were at one time, and we'd go out and hunt, we wanted to shoot as many as we could, or shoot our limit at least, and you can't do that anymore. What's your opinion of this overall waterfowl situation? What's happened? A lot of people out there are duck hunters watching this show right now, and they want to know. They've been told many things. Ducks Unlimited says this, and Delta Waterfowl says this, and the state says that, and there's conflicts. And every time I pick up a magazine, duck population up in millions in Canada, and then I go hunting and I don't see very many. What's happened?
Well, it's a multiple of things all at once. It has happened. I think the thing that's really affected the way we historically hunted here the most was changes in farming practices. Back in the 1960s, a lot of the farmers went to big equipment. A lot of small farmers left farming, and they consolidated with large operations. And over the period of, say, 25 or 30 years there, we went from, moldboard plowing to harvesting using other techniques. And the big equipment, there was not as much grain spilled. And so the ducks didn't need to go to the cornfield because there was no corn there. It had been picked clean. So a number of different things, but I think that the most important thing was the changes of habitat for waterfowl, not much in the way of aquatic vegetation. And it's just changed from the way we used to hunt ducks and the way they used to react.
Now, I hear that they see them on radar. They still come over. They don't stop.
Well, that's true. And, over long periods of doing the things the same way, their behavior maybe has changed. Maybe they don't hit the Hennepin Hopper area up on the upper Great Bend of the Illinois River, and then, due to navigation cues, decide it's time to head south along the Illinois River. Maybe a lot of those ducks are bypassing that
going
altogether.
to the Mississippi.
Going to the Mississippi.
Or the Wabash Basin on
Right.
the other side. I hear there's down along the Ohio.
Right.
They've actually increased in population, and I hear that parts of southern Illinois are seeing more ducks than they used to. But here in central Illinois, we're sitting here on December the 17th, and we've got this big window. We're looking out over towards Clear Lake, Waterfowl Hunting Club, and this time of year you should see something flying, and I haven't seen anything since we've been here. Wayne is a wealth of knowledge. I could talk to Wayne for 2 or 3 hours easily about the Illinois River and its backwaters, and also all the lakes and ponds that are in this state. But let's talk about a couple specific things that interest me, and I'm sure will interest some of our viewers. One of my favorite fish, a lot of people go, oh, that can't be, is the bullhead. It's almost gone. I remember fishing on the Illinois River back in the 70s. We could catch 100 a day up at Woodford County Ditch, you know. Used to get a lot of them at Rice Lake. There was, you know, places where you could go get bullheads. I haven't caught a bullhead, and I don't fish a whole lot, but I fish enough to get an idea that there's just not many around. What has happened to the bullhead?
Well, there is some research going on in that, and it looks like it might be related to the amount of pharmaceuticals that go through septic waste facilities, and when they get back into the contributing water, they're basically unaltered by the filtration process. And whether that's selecting for either females or males, we think maybe it's selecting for males in the population. And, you know, animals usually have a 50-50
Balance in population.
Right, and we think that that's very much affected by things like birth control medication. And it's been that way since the big push to do birth control via medication.
So you've done studies but seeing the advancement of those types of medicines or, you know, drugs and the decline of fish.
Yeah, it's being looked at pretty closely by ichthyologists and people involved with fishery research. And some work has been done, but more needs to be done.
Yeah, it's really hard to believe that something you wouldn't even think, but you know, once you start putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, it starts to make sense.
Oh, the world is very complex.
And anytime man intervenes and changes it, it blows the whole picture, doesn't it?
It does. Something changes in the environment, and there are going to be...
It's a domino effect.
Right.
And so once this is gone, well, this depended on that, and so on and so forth,
Right.
and it just is detrimental to not just one species, but many species.
Right. And that's something that's happened back in the 1970s. We had something that was approved by Congress called the Clean Water Act. And after that went through and the new regulations were in effect, the fishery has just responded tremendously to that action. I don't know where it would be if it was not for the Clean Water Act.
45 years working for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, what a great career. I've seen you so many times in the last 40 years going down the road, and here comes Wayne with that boat, and you know that he's been out doing his job and doing it very well. I want to thank you for this presentation. I want to wish you many years of a great retirement, and thanks for sharing some of the knowledge that you have, and I could spend many hours with you, and it's very fascinating. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Harry. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Adventure Sports Outdoors, brought to you in part by Corsaw Lumber, manufacturers of quality hardwood products, buyers of standing timber in Smithfield, Central Pool Supply, everything from pools to pool tables and much more in Peoria on West Pioneer Parkway. Mike O'Brien, Remax Commercial, Traders Unlimited Commercial. Kelleher's Irish Pub and Eatery, located on Peoria's riverfront, open 11 a.m. daily. Our thanks to all of these sponsors.
Thanks for watching another edition of Adventure Sports Outdoors. We had a wonderful time with Wayne. We could have spent many hours here at the Jake Wolf Fish Hatchery in Manito and talk about a lot of things. I want to wish you a Happy New Year, and I hope you had a wonderful Christmas. We'll see you in Florida next month.